All right. Yeah. Awesome. This is one of my favorite topics. Our EQ is something that most of us never received any training on in our entire lives. And yet today, if you ask CEOs, 50% of who they hire and who they promote, their promotion or their hire is based on their soft skills. And so EQ is really near and dear to my heart because I've been in the tech field since 94. I'm a social criminal justice major, and yet my entire career has been within tech. And I also had the lucky experience of meeting two serial entrepreneurs right out of college who hired me, and I worked for 21 years across 3 different companies. It was all about soft skills. And in my day, and still a lot today, that's been considered a sales skill. And I'm out here saying it's a life skill, it's a business skill, it's an absolute necessary skill, it's now a competitive skill in tech to have good soft skills. And that's our EQ. And so that's why I'm here to talk about this. I got into cyber in 2007 when I left the technical staffing business that I spent 13 years developing and went to Rapid7, and so that was my entry point into cyber, and I've stayed ever since, pretty much, other than one stint in content management, because the cyber community is the most social serving community in tech I've met. And being a criminal justice sociology major, I just enjoy the clientele so much that I decided to build a staffing firm in cyber. And so today I own and operate CyberSN, which is the cybersecurity network. We only focus on cyber professionals. We are national and certainly the largest in our field. And so with that, I can tell you that my data today not only comes from personal experience of being a sociologist, focused on why and what humans do on a daily basis and how it impacts their life. I can also tell you that where I come from is statistics of being in staffing as long as I have, as well as being around tech companies and staffing tech companies, all of my experiences in tech, and certainly cyber since 2007. So EQ is something I think we're starting to hear a lot more about. Has anybody heard the term recently? I feel like I'm seeing it more. Maybe it's because I'm out talking, but are you all seeing it more by any chance? Literally the term EQ, yeah, you're feeling it too, which is awesome, right? This is how movements start. What are movements about other than change? Change is good, not bad. It's adapting to life, and we are no longer in sort of the mechanical era of using our bodies to perform. We now use our minds at a greater capacity, which means communication. How we speak and how we represent ourselves is literally impacts life and death today in cybersecurity, which is what we're talking about. This is definitely that type of seriousness level, in that this community service is the protection of us all and the protection of ourselves, and that, as we all know, comes out in many ways, which could absolutely be life and death, not just financial and privacy. And so I'm out in our world, giving back in my way to teach and bring awareness to our soft skills, which is our EQ. And the most amazing thing about this is that our EQ is a constant, meaning you can constantly develop. It does not sort of rely on what you're born with, as our IQ does. And so that's so positive. It means that really people can change if they choose to change. And that's why I call this Hack Your EQ. It's not just because we're all in cyber, and certainly defending and attacking has to do with the term hacking. It's also, and more so, from the perspective of our minds are programs. And if we want to achieve a different result, a different behavior, a different status in career and money and livelihood, and ultimately happiness for sure, then we must hack it. We must break into it. We must retrain it. We must create a new program, a new thought process. And it's training. It's not just a desire. I've spent many, many years training in the art of communication. I call it, when I walked into it, it was called transformational mind dynamics, which doesn't sound businessy as much as it sounds having fun, and yet it's all about business. It was many, many years, and I'm so thankful that I had that training. And so some of what I do, I incorporate a lot of that, and also, as I said, the data from our clients as to why a particular person was able to advance over another person or not advance at all. And so join me, ask questions, jump in if you got something that comes to your mind. Don't worry, this is more of a workshop interaction than it is just a talk. So I mentioned a little bit about why this matters. Let me give you the statistics that also, and go a little bit deeper here. We have a large attrition issue in cyber and in tech, meaning still today, certainly in cyber, there are more women leaving than coming in. And while we know that 90% of the workforce is men, I can tell you that they're also very challenged in their interactions with each other. This is a human problem, meaning men are moving their jobs every 12 to 18 months on average in tech and cyber, and therefore that means a lot of breakdown. And so imagine, a chaotic environment and then putting in another addition to that, which is the diversity piece that is still challenging for us all. And so imagine, that it's not just to blame others, it's to understand where we're at in society, and that we still have not figured out how to work well together in business and in money. And so this is about all of us recognizing how important it is, even if we don't consider ourselves a diverse individual, because what it means to change jobs every 12 to 18 months is a lot of heartache. And as somebody that worked for the same individuals for 21 years, it breaks my heart, because I had the opposite experience. I had this wonderful experience of love and caring and success. These companies that we built are high performing, going public, advancing, making money for lots of folks. So we need to recognize that we are losing more women, and that isn't because people don't want them. It's because our environments are already chaotic. They are not completely defined in roles and responsibilities and such that people can perform without politics. And so therefore we must, as individuals, recognize this and recognize it's not necessarily a personal problem, meaning being a diverse person in the workforce can feel very personal. And yet, if we can expand our minds to look at this whole picture of what's going on, most people aren't having a lot of fun, not just the folks that aren't the majority. That being said, it really is important that we recognize that treating each other is where this all comes from. So caring about how we think, feel, and perceive, we're going to get deeper into that, really makes for good business sense, because if we're moving jobs, projects aren't getting completed, lots of change control means lots of lost information, lots of IP moving around, certainly not the way that I'd like to see us all being protecting ourselves in this country, right? So we need to get ourselves into this EQ stuff fast, very, very fast. All right, and you can see here that 62% of folks that have left their jobs recently have said they would have stayed if their culture had more respect. Like, what a trip, right? All of us are going, yeah, no kidding, and yet how powerful and in many ways sad that this is what we're doing in the most educated, wealthy, country. So we're going to change that, because I know everybody wants to. It's the mind is programmed, right? Like, seriously, the mind is programmed, and you must reprogram for different behavior. So it's all of us programming. And just to get further proof here, this slide always makes my day, in that we finally have statistics behind this stuff such that people will listen, right? So this study was done by Harvard and Google, and they looked at their performers that just keep getting promoted, that everybody loves, and looked at EQ and IQ, and of course, I say of course because I see it all day long, the folks that were the most productive and most popular and loved by the community have had higher EQ and lower IQ. Which is just lovely data for us all to have, to further continue to say, hey, education system, and hey, organizations, we must train in EQ. It's not going to happen just because we want it or we talk about it, just like the hard skills. The hard skills take years and years and years, and so do the soft skills. And so we must, really demand that we bring this to the forefront of education into our businesses and our lives. So when you think of EQ, something to think about is your personal competence and your social competence. And this really helped me in my early days of looking at this topic, such that I could start to break down the problem and look at the pieces as a program. And really, it's the self-awareness is the first place to start, being self-aware. And to me, being self-aware is about really being able and interested, in how others think, feel, and perceive. These are our tools to win-win communication. So if I really am going to have a conversation with you and I have a meeting with you, if I spend time before I meet you to think about how you think, feel, and perceive. So how you think, meaning how does this impact your business? How does this impact what you do every day? This conversation that we're about to have, so which means how do you think? And then how do you feel about that? And what are your perceptions about this project, our conversation, this meeting we're going to have, whatever it may be. And so I can be more self-aware when I'm empowered with that kind of information. It's not just to say I want to be self-aware. I have to give myself information about others to then be able to look at myself. It's sort of how the brain works the most, is to sort of look at other people, and then we can see ourselves a lot more. And so self-awareness leads to self-management, because once we know and we're aware of ourselves, we can start to train ourselves to the behaviors that we like and want, that are more powerful for us. It's not about right or wrong. In fact, that's the piece that can take us all off track on a regular basis, is seeking to apply right or wrongs to our behaviors. Of course, we know the real right and wrongs, and I'm harming others. I'm talking about the right or wrongs of how we think, feel, or perceive. There is no right or wrong. This is not hurting anybody else in terms of how you think, feel, and perceive. So own it and feel it and think it and perceive it, and then evaluate it and self-manage it, and make it the most powerful you can make for yourself. Now, again, I said these trainings take years, just like hard skills. So today is as high level as it gets, and yet imagine training for months and years on thinking, feeling, and perceiving of humans, and that's what I'm talking about. And when we do, our self-awareness and our self-management becomes very high. And then, of course, you sort of have to start there, and then your social awareness just comes, that training, that ownership of that content comes to you. And so through that, your social awareness will grow, and so your social management of relationships in your life. How many of us have heard that relationships are 50-50, right? Like I grew up on that. We all grew up on that, thinking it's 50-50. So you're to blame and I'm to blame. Well, when I went to my classes and heard for the first time that it's 100% me. My relationships are 100% based on me. Meaning, should I choose to have a loving, wonderful relationship with you, I will. And I know that now. I learned that. The 50-50 actually gives us the way not to have that loving, powerful relationship, because I get to blame someone else. I get to put it's not possible onto somebody else. And so when I learned that, and then learned how to actually be that, 100% responsible for the relationships in my life, and it happened in my early 30s when I went to this training. I was 33. It changed. I remember thinking, oh man, how come this wasn't given to me so much earlier? In fact, I feel that way about most of this content, but specifically this one. Because once I got that, it was a completely different ownership of my life, right? Because who chooses how I think, feel, and perceive other than myself? So the brain ought to work for me versus just work. And that's what's happening with your subconscious versus your conscious mind. Your subconscious mind is running the majority of the time. It's something like, and I apologize not having the statistics, but maybe 1 or 2% of the time we are in our conscious mind today as humans. We can change that. Well, that's with the whole, the power of now, the being in the now. And yet the only way to change that, and you can't significantly change it so far, it hasn't been proven by humans in any means, but however, you change it by 5% and it's game-changing life experience, meaning the ability to stop and be in the now and say, hey, I'm choosing to be mad. I'm choosing to be sad. I'm choosing to be angry. That's a very powerful place to put oneself, because then, as for me, I have some words that when I find myself in one of those places too long, because it's okay to be there for moments, it's normal, it's not right or wrong, and yet I don't want to live in that. So I have to remind myself of how good I have life, and so I have a word that I use. It's actually refugee, because to me that is one of the things in life that just freaks me out the most, is that somebody can take somebody else's home and push them away, push them out. My life will somehow lead to helping solve that at some point. And today it's a bad place for me, and so it wakes me up, and I have no right to be in that anger, sad, or what have you space. And so, but this came from years of training, and I encourage you all to think deeply about the fact that your mind is choosing your emotions. And can you train your mind to choose others, or get yourself aware enough, quick enough to not live in those disempowering emotions? They're not bad, they're disempowering, right? Humans don't really love hanging out with other humans who are angry, right? And yet we are social creatures. And so we will not live a life most powerful if we live in anger. And so this is why I care. I want to see us live in the most emotionally powerful state, because when we do, we can create. Look at what we've created as humans already. We go to other planets. We have the ability to see each other and not even be in the same room. Right? The list can go on and on. Imagine what we could do if we had more time in the powerful state of emotions versus the disempowerful. And considering the statistics I showed you all earlier of how much we all break up in the world of business, which is where we spend more time than anything else, I'd say we're very disempowered. And yet look what we've created. So it's a real sort of bittersweet message to us all. All right, so I've got a tree behind me. It's got a lot of words. Again, years and years in training on these topics is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking these topics into the workforce. I'm talking about taking these topics and making them a part of our review of how we're judged as performers, right? At every level. How many of you have even heard about how recently there are a lot of groups challenging larger organizations to put executive bonuses on retention and development and of people and cultures, and certainly diversity? Have you heard this? They've even gone to the boards and petitioned in courts. So the movement is happening. It is not about punishing anybody. It's about recognizing that we are in the time of social behaviors in business matter the most, because we work together as teams. There is no such thing as no team. When I got into tech in the early 90s, one of the questions we would ask when we took a job order for a software developer or an IT professional was, are they going to interact with any other humans? Because 90% of the folks weren't interacting and weren't deemed presentable / wouldn't put them in front of a client, is what the terms were. And so we needed to know, so that who we sent in, do they want to be client facing? Did they want to, right? But those questions don't even, are you kidding? They don't even exist. The first thing that comes out of somebody who's hiring mouth is, I need somebody who's a good communicator. I need somebody that can work on teams. It's like, before any tech discussion, before anything. So from 94 to just a couple of years ago, truly, is when this has been starting. Went from 20% of it, of sort of the must-have communication skills, to now 50% of the hire is based on that, just in the last two, 3 years. So we can see that, as we see in almost everything, the money is driving the conversation. Because I, as an organization, cannot be successful unless I employ and retain people who have strong EQ skills. Money has now become in the equation. just like the business of cyber. What made cyber take off? Anybody have any ideas in terms of a business? Anybody got any guesses? What was it?
Government work?
Compliance.
Yeah.
Compliance. In 2007, PCI wasn't fining. It was known that we ought to follow. It was the first real compliant ordinance. But when they started fining in 2009, boy, instant boom, right? And yet, we all know how logical it makes sense to protect ourselves and follow compliance and minimally, and yet this is not new. This is life. This is certainly capitalism, that money drives behavior. So this is the good news. We've got money driving EQ behavior. We're at a state where we have statistics to prove and show that you better care about EQ for your people. And so, well, when that happens, and it's happening now, we're going to see significant change in quality of work behaviors and in work emotions and in the feelingness of happiness at work. We've got work to do to get there. It's here, though, and it's not going to go away. And like I said, I'll take it, whether it be because of money or whether it be because we all want to live happier. I'll take either. All right, so any surprises on the tree behind me? Anybody see any terms up there? You're like, holy moly, this is going to become this is a required skill set that I can be possibly evaluated on and performance and my income attached to. Anything up there surprising?
The empathy one.
Yeah, right? Right?
Because aren't we told to get the job done?
Yeah.
Like, we don't care how you get the job done, get the job done.
Yeah.
And yet they're saying do it kind of.
But if you apply empathy, then you can get the job done in a way that doesn't crush the other person that is
If you're working with
affected by
somebody
it.
that has that empathetic circuit, yeah. But if you're working around other people that just don't have empathy,
Right. Hence the training
yeah.
that we need.
But I agree. I work in a mixed office, so I've had a lot of trouble with that because I moved from a non-mixed office to a mixed office, and I've been talked to way more since I've been in the new office than it was in the old office.
Sorry, what do you mean by mixed?
Like, mixed between people that are very antisocial, might be very high functioning, very high level intelligent, talk with lots of acronyms. You know, when you're at work, you get really excited about what you're working on. If you're around somebody that is, customer service facing, they don't know what coding language you're working in or what any of those acronyms are. And it can be very alienating to them.
Yeah. And so in this dialogue of how to bring empathy to the workforce, what was just shown there is words. The words we use will have to change. Words are absolutely the number one ding answer. Certainly body language, there's other ways of communicating, but our number one way of communicating with each other, verbally and written, are words. And so in order to have empathy isn't just about wanting to have empathy. It isn't just about, although it needs to start with understanding that we all want the same things from life. We all want respect and love and kindness in the workforce. We truly do. And we want performance and productivity and feeling valued and getting things done. This is within us all as basics. And yet the empathy of somebody else I still can have empathy for you, but if I don't have the words, the training of the words to use to communicate what I need to get done at work and what is going on at work and still be empathetic, well, that's the mismatch. It's not that we've got a large population of terrible humans out there. We've actually got a small population of humans that have really ill intentions, and a large population of people that have good intentions and poor word training, poor we put in this umbrella of communication, which is really our words. Yes?
It's actually the assertiveness and trust. There's usually an inverse proportionality between those two concepts.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because you're talking about Harvard Business Review, and one of the things I was recently published about is just kind of like these denigrating terms, like assertiveness, that are applied to women that somehow make them seem like almost intimidating. These things should be almost minimalized between the sexes. It's like, assertiveness and intellect is something that should be celebrated between between men and women, just like emotional quotient. It's kind of like, okay, well, you are an emotional creature too. Like, let's bounce off of that. But in the boardroom, I work on Wall Street, so pretty much in the boardroom, everybody in there is a man. And it's almost as if, because you're putting yourself out as an assertive person, it's almost as if nobody trusts you. And that's so essential to team building, and that's something you encounter every day. It's like, oh God, do I have to tone myself down to make you trust me, or am I supposed to, like pretty much show what I know? Like, there's a diverse purview of what I know, and it's kind of funny because every day they're like, Consilient is about portfolio, it's about diversity. I'm like, well, you guys aren't very diverse here,
Yeah, right. I'm always getting the pitch of diversifying my portfolio. I actually understand. So a lot was shared there. Let's start with trust. We're in cyber, so trust is the number one thing that when I say anything up here, you're not in cyber, you're supposed to naturally be untrusted of your information, of what people are saying or doing, enough to investigate, not judge, enough to investigate. And so that can make it even harder for our industry. In general, not even being in cyber, trust is earned. You don't just trust somebody. You can trust in good intentions, but you trust and you verify, you trust and you watch. And then through time, trust is built. And the interesting thing is how much time. In my own personal experience, it wasn't until late in my 30s, actually really late in my 30s, that I hired an executive versus homegrown an executive. And my trust factor out of the gates, the time frame was very low because I wasn't, I forgot that I had usually trained and developed people. And realized that was given way too soon. And it really harmed actually the business at the time, giving that trust so soon. And so it is an experience. However, it didn't mean there was major, negative issues. It just means when I look back at growing businesses, working in teams, what worked, what didn't work so well, how could it have been more powerful? I learned that, I too am still and will always be learning on what is the time frame of trust, And so it takes time when you're sort of homegrown and been with somebody from the beginning. It's a lot easier to get there. The older we are, the more experiences we've had, and the less trust we have for other humans based on what's happened already in our lives of business. It takes longer, and so trust is tricky, and yet you have to be assertive and confident. And I personally think that if we all sat in rooms and talked about these words on a regular basis and said, everybody needs to be assertive. Everybody needs to be, and just talked about what does it mean to be assertive and what does it mean, then all of that, women get tagged with being the B word because they're assertive, right? All that would go away. It would go away if we actually sat and talked about what we want assertiveness in the workforce, and here's what assertiveness means, right? And so this is the work. This is the work. We can't sit and complain because we know the problems. We must get ourselves and get our teams and our companies and everybody willing to train on what these topics mean in your culture. What does it mean to be assertive in your culture? And there are companies, mostly if you look at the Fortune, 500 or 100 for sure, you'll see that there are, that there are sort of policies and procedures behind what does it mean to be empathy in our company? What does it mean to be assertive? You'll start to see these now, not at huge levels, but certainly get to see them. So I'm glad you brought up trust and what was the other one you said? Assertiveness is one of the other ones that I get a lot of questions from on women. It's one of the most challenging sort of labels that women get, which is you're too assertive or you're too aggressive, right? Or, sometimes, Deidre, you can just be a B. And I got that for sure. And yet they loved me. It wasn't, and again, this is where I say, we need to be very careful on how personal we take things and stay calm, cool, and collected and engage that conversation. Geez, thanks for the feedback. Can you share with me how that shows up? Because these aren't words that we want to label with. These are words we want to discuss. These aren't, we have to start somewhere. There has to be a baseline sort of topic and words, right? And so we got to go deeper though. Much, much deeper. And so when we find ourselves in challenges, we must ask people to say, how does that show up in the office or in work? Tell me how you see that and where it comes. Because that's the meat of it, where we can take
I
feedback.
would write it on a sticker, put a heart around it, and then stick it to that guy's forehead too. Like, oh yeah, you're assertive too. Go.
Yeah. And saying thank you, and it's a compliment, is also another option. You know whether they're saying it positively or negatively. So if they're saying it positively, I too would put a heart around it and put it on their forehead and say thank you.
No,
But
even
if they're
negative, like diffuse things with humor, like boom.
Oh, for sure. Although I don't know about on the head. How about just put it on their desk? I definitely use love and humor, and yet at times this discussion isn't humor. It's love.
Yeah,
It's not humor. In that, if somebody is going to tell me I'm too assertive, that is a very serious conversation, because my livelihood depends on that comment. And I, like many people in this world, particularly men, find that I'm going to fight for money, because it is what the game is, and I can give back more with it. I create jobs with money. It's what I like to do. What? Anybody else? Words up here that struck home for you? They're so big, right? They're just massive. You can go deep into stress tolerance. Let's look at stress tolerance, right? I mean, does anybody have a policy in their companies for stress tolerance, and what does it even mean? You know what it means? Like, is it okay to have an episode, right, of not being able to handle stress? Like, how do you handle if somebody in your team breaks down and cries? How do you handle if somebody in your team literally gets mad and angry and shouts? That's what stress tolerance is. How much tolerance will we have or not have? I'd like to see us have high levels of tolerance, other than fear for our bodies and our minds, meaning allow people to be mentally safe, to be emotional. Is what I'd like to see. And yet again, do we talk about it? I know that it's challenging.
Sorry, you're talking about tolerance now, or about stress tolerance?
So stress tolerance depends on, stress, the tolerance of how stress shows up in the workforce, stress tolerance. So in the workforce.
Okay, so you're talking about if somebody else is very stressed and has a breakdown, us being tolerant of that, which is different than me tolerating a lot of stress on myself.
Right.
That's how I interpret
Don't
that.
want you doing that. Oh, we want you to tolerate pressure. We don't want you that's another topic that falls actually under, where did I put that? I put that under our what do we call it? Self-care. And where did I put that? I guess I must have had it in our. See, these are bigger. Like each one of these is their course, and then I go into subtopics.
Okay.
That's how long this is.
Yeah, to me, stress tolerance means me tolerating a lot of stress in the workplace.
Yeah.
That doesn't
how
sound
I
fun.
handle it. That's what that term means.
Well, we can talk about both, because they fall under. That's what I'm saying. They both fall in these terms deeper. These classes are hours and hours, each of them. So from the perspective of how we manage our own stress, we definitely self-care. Where I talk, certainly my friends and family organizations about health a lot, and our stress affects our health a lot. So exercise, yoga, breathing, whatever, all of those different things can really reduce our stress tolerances for ourselves. Just breathing. I used to smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I quit in my late 20s and found yoga not too long after, and I realized how the breathing of a cigarette inside and out is very much so what yoga is, and why yoga is so addictive is that it's about breath. It's about taking deep breaths, breathing in and breathing out, and moving body to breath if you want a physical workout as well. But meditation, restorative yoga, basic yoga is about breath. And so, of course, smoking is even more addictive beyond the chemicals that are in the tobacco. It's also the addictive state of meditation, of relaxing, right? It's a break. I'm going to go have a cigarette. I'm going to go take a break. And so I'd love to see us all taking deep breaths and taking breaks to take deep breaths. Just 5 minutes will change your stress levels. They will lower them, absolutely lower them. So from that perspective, there is no question we have a lot of stress in our community, because we talked about the statistics of breakdown and how much, right? And more people leaving than coming in. So we've got high stress environments. And so to me, it's all about self-care. And, I got very unhealthy in this business myself. And like I said, smoking the 2 packs of cigarettes and not watching anything of what I was eating, and was severely challenged with my health in just my late 20s, and had to make change. And luckily I got scared straight with my physical health. And yet it isn't something I could blame on the industry or even society. It was my own behaviors of self-care. And when I, again, realized that, it was very powerful. It doesn't mean it wasn't easy. It was very powerful to say, I too can control how my body feels and my stress levels. And so deep breathing is probably one of the best gifts. It's one of the reasons I love yoga the most. And then on the other side, how do we, not the other side of this term, stress tolerance, how do we handle other people's stress? And are other people allowed to reveal their stress levels in our workforce? And if yes, then what does that look like? What is the tolerance of yes? And if no, why and how is that handled? Right? So for instance, I love when organizations have programs for folks that are struggling with stress, and that find that it comes out physically or mentally or both, and that there's programs to support, versus kicking out, you're underperforming, you don't belong here anymore. That stuff doesn't work, right? The first examples work, the self-care of ourselves and others. And so, these conversations have to be had in organizations and discussed and created into policy in order for us to have the change we want, and certainly in order for us to choose who we want to work for. So one of the beauties in these statistics, I keep saying there's bittersweet, there's, in all of this, is that you can choose where you work. You're in such demand. I don't care if you're in the entry level. If you're willing to not settle and take that job that you first got because of how hard it was to even find it, and keep going, you will find both. I promise you. I promise you. And that's one of the reasons why I love this staffing for cyber professionals and my friends, is that I can give that gift. I can say, you don't have to take, I can show you lots of opportunities. Take the one you love. Wait until you feel love. Wait until you feel it in your gut, and then take that one. Right? So that is the way we ought to live, because one day we will not be here. And that's the whole point, is to live now as healthy and happy as we can, empowering ourselves. In also the business of capital, we are in the heart of capitalism, cyber and tech. We are in it. It's the new money, and it's also war. So it doesn't get any more serious in terms of money being in this play too. What else is up here to have a little bit of fun with? Anger management. Yeah. It's on its own for just that reason. How much are we seeing this in the workforce today? How much anger do we feel at work? Anybody want to share? Anybody, is it medium, high, low, rare?
I work for you. Is this a trick question?
1%?
Generally low.
It's been a long time that I've really felt anger in the workplace, or had somebody express anger in the workplace.
Yay! I love
it has
hearing
happened,
that.
but 15 years ago is the best example I can think of.
Wow, that's awesome.
Where somebody called me a liar in a conference room in front of my boss, but yeah.
Wow.
Other than that,
great. Well, yes.
I think I've taught myself to take my job less serious, so that way I don't get angry about decisions that are out of my control. I just roll with it and then watch and learn from other people's handling of scenarios, not necessarily making mistakes per se, but it's like what I perceive as a mistake today, I could get really pissed off about. Else I could sit back and watch it all come together and hope for the best. And that's a heck of a lot better for me, and it's easier for me to manage myself.
Thanks for being honest. So you in your past would get angry, and what worked for you was to say, hey, life's too short. What are you doing? Just chill out. Watch more. I encourage that of all of us. Talk less, listen more, absorb more, and think before we react. It's a very powerful thing to be able to do. We don't have to react right now, and so that's great. That's great. Are you anybody else feeling high levels of anger in the workforce? Friends, like what would we say percentage-wise? And certainly. When I came into business, there was still slamming of doors. Literally, people, not in our own organizations necessarily, but we were in staffing, so we would hear, and I still hear the stories every day. Slamming the doors, the punching of the walls, the throwing things, cussing, screaming. Oh yeah. I can tell you today we hear it about 10%. That being said, when it happens, it's like any other incident. People don't know what to do, and it still needs to be talked about. Maybe in a smaller category than up here.
I will share the job I had before I joined Deidre's company. We had a couple toxic people that would literally yell at each other in the bullpen in front of each other. And coming out of that job, I felt like I had PTSD. Like I really was so gun shy of people having arguments around me and really walking on eggshells around management, and it took a lot of time to get comfortable in our culture for me to be like, it's okay to make mistakes, you just own them. It's okay to have conflict, you just own it, and it was I feel like it made a huge difference, not just professionally, but personally, to be able to own that management of relationships with other people, owning not only upset and anger or disappointment, but also owning encouragement and giving props, and it goes both ways. When you feel free to express upset, you also feel more free, I think, to feel happiness, and
right.
It unlocks that a little bit.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's so awesome. I'm so glad you shared that. That's fantastic. Powerful. Yes.
I think I feel a little bit so being in cyber for a long time and being the person who has to tell people what they have to change, and people who are in the business who are not necessarily happy with that. And that's why I was so surprised when empathy was the first one being named, because I felt like my trying to apply empathy and understand how somebody else would react to what I'm telling them they have to do that's going to impact their business or their project or whatever, and explaining to them that I'm not trying to punish them, but I'm trying to help them be more secure and be able to enable that business.
Yeah.
I felt like that's come a long way in preventing that anger. So I've always felt that empathy was a really important one.
Yeah.
Or at least since I figured that out, which was around those 15 years ago, I think. So
Powerful.
I think that's made a big difference. Now, to be perfectly honest though, I've spent most of my time not in the same room with the people that I have to tell all those things to, because I work for a large company, so it was all remote and all on the phone, and so I don't know, maybe I'm missing those very angry reactions after we all hang out.
No, well, maybe, and great problem to have.
Right.
Your situation is exactly what we want, and I'm hoping we see more and more of it. And it's wonderful that you got that get back when you got it 15 years ago. But when we come from empathy and give direction, give orders from empathy, that's actually called win-win communication. It's truly win-win. It's good for them. It's good for you.
10 years now that I think about
10
it.
years?
More like
10 years of freedom. It is a nice place to get. I remember when I got that, oh wow, this is how I can create win-win. It's super powerful. Yeah.
Oh, I think most of these topics, or both of these conversations touched on, is about, anger management and then isolating yourself from these really toxic people, because everybody has that one person in their workplace that will literally look over their computer screen to make sure that they are doing everything right, because you're walking on eggshells. It's funny because one of my friends also has this problem, oh, they should get together. Yeah, and and to me, I actually have this person. We have SEC laws. They're really crazy. And there's this one girl where she's like, "Are you talking to a client on your cell phone?" I'm like, "It's my Uber. You want to listen?" You know, like there are just these people that like make it really toxic. And I think that you have to create that mental mindset for you that's really important. I talked to my boss about this too. I was like, this girl, I have to sit next to her, and she really wants to listen to all my conversations. And he's like, I think she's obsessed with you. And so I brought a bunch of pink pillows in the next day, and this is the only office that you'll see that's pink on Wall Street.
Right.
Like especially at Morgan Stanley, it's like why is this desk pink?
Did it work?
It's to scare away some people. You know.
Did it work?
I don't think it showed that I was confident that I was going to take this, but honestly, it was just, you know, it did work to some extent because it made me happy, you know? That's so important.
What's interesting about your story is,
Yeah.
and this is where leadership and management must be accountable.
Yeah.
It's, you know, for the rest of us, it could be a nice to have, interesting topic. But if you're a manager, you occupy the title of ownership of the team's success and culture, then, you know, handling that situation by saying she's obsessed with you is not powerful.
Yeah.
In fact, that's adding to the problem,
Yeah.
and meaning, you know, there's no responsibility being taken to change it. We cannot. I can tell you all that as much as you think you can protect yourself from that one toxic person, by definition of toxic, you will not protect yourself. Meaning, like, you know, it's still settling on a certain lower happiness rate.
Yeah.
And in some situations, it will be settling for an unhappy rate by not finding resolution to that problem, i.e., sitting next to somebody every day
Yeah. You feel
and
like
having
I want
conflict
chills.
is
It's
unhealthy.
really hard.
It's
Yeah.
super unhealthy. And that person that has a title of management is absolutely responsible for making it in a healthy environment. And so I would encourage you to seek to find ways to help that individual come with a greater game, with a more powerful game. And I think that most of the time we shy away from that conversation. I also remember the day when I was told confrontation is love. So my whole life, I actually do not like confrontation. You may think that I am a confrontation junkie and go out. No, in fact, I'm the opposite. I will do an act every day to avoid what I know would be conflict if I didn't act in the way I did. That is the absolute truth. If it gets to actual confrontation of conflict, I am not happy with myself because I don't like it. It's not a great experience. And so when I learn, and that's the gift that I got from learning this, is that conflict actually is love, or confrontation, the willingness to confront somebody is love. And so if I do get to that place, I own it, and yet, man, I avoid it. I'll make sure that it never happens. But, you know, to confront somebody means you're staying in the conversation, because it can't change unless you stay in the conversation. When we avoid the conversation, when we put pillows around our cubicles, when we create the silo, or when we just have it as sort of it is, and it's funny, and it sucks, and it's this, and it's that, then it has its own space. And when it has its own space, that's negative energy taking from your positive energy. And so the willingness to confront just means to engage all of that. And through the engagement, you can change that negative into positive. You really can. If, again, you take 100% responsibility for the relationships in your life. And so is it possible to have a conversation with this person and say, hey, I've realized that I've created a story about you in my head, that you really just want to listen to all my phone calls, and you really want to, you know, cross the line in what I'm doing versus what you're doing. And the reality is, I'm sure you want to be just as successful as I do, and I'd like to, you know, create a different story about you, and that is that we can be great business partners and get to know each other and learn what we like and don't like about, you know, how we can work sitting next to each other. And could you create something different? And this is the power of leadership, and this is the people that are going to find greater happiness. You know, and also propel, because again, teams And it's not to say that all must propel either. It's a choice. And that's why I love talking about this. It doesn't mean that we have to be a certain way of communication. We don't have to go have that conversation. Just understand what power gives or takes away if you do or if you don't, so you can make your choices. It could be a 5% of a bothersome to you. It could be a 50. You may choose. For 1% too much is 10% too much. You as an individual must choose. And so I really appreciate you sharing that story, because it's really what happens every day in the workforce is these relationships, and just one can be very destructive. And I would like to think that one person can and those people can come together versus have to separate. I'd like us to play for that and see what happens when we play for that, right? So I'm going to move on here from this. We're almost done, actually. This has been wonderful. Does anybody want to talk about anything on this tree before we wrap up here? Anything else come to mind? I think the biggest takeaway for me is to everybody is that we need to look at our EQ skills like our hard skills. They've got to be practiced. They've got to be something that we build policies and procedures around, behaviors, such that we all can really be our most powerful, positive self. Yes?
I was kind of looking for a way to talk about being overtaxed in your element. It's like you have your boss asking you to produce 100% capacity, and then they come over and drop 20% more on your plate.
Yeah.
Every little while, and it's like, how do you convey the message that, hey, I'm stressed the fuck out, and I'm probably going to start reclusing, separating myself. How do you approach that?
So full transparency and honesty, right? Which is I'm feeling overwhelmed with the amount of work. It's growing and it has grown to a level of not realistic. And I'd like to show you all the projects I have. I have how much time I need to attend to each of these daily and sort of monthly, and project it out in order to achieve X result that you're looking for. And so you want to add some math to it. You want to put some percentage numbers of time and the deliverables that are literally measurable, and show, like we do in business, show the time that something will take. So there's the emotion of it and the feelings, and then there's the data and the business conversation. And so it's both together. And the business conversation will take the emotion, or allow the person to give you empathy without this business measurable piece here of how you're spending your time and how much time these projects are going to take, and showing them how it's well over 100%. Without that, that's where things go wrong, because now this person's emotions and your emotions are all we're talking about, and we're not giving grounding information to that. And so that's why I talk so much about the importance and the framework of successful business environments being measurable agreements. And with that, we can have the ability to go over capacity and right size everything. And we can even do it real time. The minute a project comes to you, when you live in sort of everything mapped out of time and responsibility and role, then every time something new comes down the pipe, it can just be real time. Hey, if I do that, then X project that I allowed X time for that was going to be done by X date, it'll now change to this date. Is that okay with you? It took me quite some time to get this in my org. It is not the easiest thing to do, meaning you have to spend the time at it. But once it's in, it's so efficient. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate so much when my teammates say to me, of course this can be done. Here's what it does to the project list and to how I'm spending my time. Here's what would be pushed, and here's by how much and why. And oh gosh, with that, I can make powerful decisions, right? With just the emotion or the upset, wow, now I'm in emotion and upset, and now I've got to go do all that work of getting that information so that we can figure it out. And I care, and I'm super empathetic and super pay attention to this. And so therefore it works. And if people aren't like that, that's breakdown. That's when things get ugly. It's a super great question, and it happens all the time, which is why we must keep everything measurable and projects really planned well. It's a very powerful gift that we've gotten, this data world has given us. Right? And then when you really do that, you're in the discussion of how many hours shall I be working?
Yeah.
Right?
Sometimes you just, it's like, well, I'm spending, 80% of my day at 100% capacity. How about I just not?
Right, and that's always a choice. The real power is to say, well, how about unless you don't have to work financially, let's empower ourselves to not feel that way, because it's not fun.
Right.
It's not a great space to be, right? And so this will keep you from that, and then, like I said, it will become the dialogue of, is 60 hours what you're willing to do, and they're willing to accept 40, 50, 70, 80. What is it? Everybody's got their choices, and at different times we choose different hours in our life that we're willing to work based on things that we want or have going on in our lives. So that keeps that in the conversation. And then you can say, oh, I'm working for the wrong place because they want 60, I want 40. They want 50, I want 40. And you can make powerful decisions in data versus the emotions of all of that, and then leave powerfully positive, leave in a good way, right? And saying, I think what I've realized is that it's not a good fit because I want to work 40 hours and you want 60. And we keep trying to make this happen, and it's not necessary. There are people out there that will want to work 60. I don't. And so it gives that, or vice versa. I'm willing to work more. There's not enough projects here. What else you got for me? I want to do more. I want to work overtime, or I want to be promoted, and then I'm happy to do more. To do that. So it gives us choices when we work this way, and I think that's the most powerful thing we have is choices, because then we don't make the wrong choice. Only happens when we don't know all our choices, and we look back and I wish I didn't make that choice. Well, you only made it because you didn't know this one, or fear was in you, and fear was owning us, which happens a lot, unfortunately. And yet, like I said, let's end this with how wonderful the statistics are that money is driving EQ to the top. I don't care why it's driven, it's driving it. And with that means that leaderships will have to have strong EQ. And when they have strong EQ, cultures will change significantly. That doesn't mean it won't change without all of us participating as leaders and folks working within teams. And so it is, and always will come down to our own accountability too. So with that, thank you. This was awesome, super fun. I want to spend hours, weeks, years on this topic, and so I look forward to having those courses for you all soon.